currently reading Nietzsche. The I think the translation of the title, because I own the book in Dutch, but the translation of the title in modern times is called The Joyful Wisdom or Joyful Science or The Gay Science. But yeah, in Dutch it's De Vrolijke Wetenschap. And I'm currently reading it. I'm about around page 100. And I am also like, when I'm reading this book, I am keeping notes in this notebook where I write down things that I believe are worth remembering or worth researching more, as a part of a reflection upon myself or upon society. I don't know, just things that are interesting. So yeah, my idea for this video was to go through some of the things that I wrote down, but there's a but, because I naturally write in Dutch because I'm Belgian, and in Belgium we have a northern part where we speak Dutch, where I'm from Flanders, and the southern part is Wallonia, and they speak French. But since I write it down in Dutch, I have to translate it to English for you to be able to follow, because I don't think a lot of you people speak Dutch. But as you notice as well, I was very sick this week. I had a flu and I had a fever and a runny nose and all of that fun stuff. But I was thinking, let's just make a reflective kind of video in ASMR style upon my notes. So I'll just take these notes, obviously, and we'll just go like to the first page. Yeah, I wrote down the title. Yeah, obviously Nietzsche, De Vrolijke Wetenschap. I also wrote down Gaia Scienza. I think it's Italian. But the book starts with a lot of like little poems and such that Nietzsche wrote. And I wrote some of them inside this book, and I wrote my reflections underneath it, just for fun, I guess. So let me just read it, but I'm gonna read it in English, but I have to be translating it because it's in Dutch, you know, because I speak Dutch, also a little bit French, but in Belgium everybody does. But so why I'm saying that is because this might not be the literal translation. I might be paraphrasing, but I'm just gonna do it like this. So I was thinking I can look up the English translation and then do that, but you know, what's the fun in that, you know? So the first poem that I wrote down is The Slippery Ice. It's called For Dancers. It's number 13, but it goes as follows. The slippery ice, a paradise for the man that knows how to dance. And why I wrote this down is because when I read it at first, it had some sort of like positive naivety around it, and some sort of like, you know, something joyful, you know. So like, it's a slippery ice, a paradise for the man that knows how to dance. But I also wrote down that I think he meant it like joyful, or like, I don't know. But I think there's also like a hidden layer in it, which also fits what he was trying to say, I believe. It kind of made me think about a person who knows how to navigate chaos, or who knows how to manipulate a situation, and uses that to his own advantage. So somebody who doesn't always act like with integrity or something. And I think that the poem resembles it well because it reads so smoothly. It seems so innocent, but actually, if you think about it, it's kind of like how people that are like a little bit of Machiavellistic or something like that, how they operate. It always seems innocent, but in reality, they kind of lack integrity. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting poem, so I wrote it down, and it was the first thing that I wanted to share. I wrote a lot of stuff down on it. I also wrote down that it sort of reminds me of the people that I have an allergy towards, and they're called opportunists. But at the same time, chaos sort of fascinates me because I myself know how to navigate through chaos. So it's like interesting. There might be some I don't know, just an interesting thought. But we'll move on towards the next poem that I wrote down, and it's called Opwaarts. In the Dutch translation, I'm kind of lost in English. Opwaarts, it means going up. You know, like it's the direction of going up. So going up, number 16. What's the best way of going up the mountain? You will climb without thinking, you dwarf. So that's the poem. So obviously this is not really a joyful poem, but it's I wrote it down because it has this clear negative authority feeling surrounding it, and it's also a non-helping power, and that's what fascinated me about the poem. It's really short, but you read it and instantly I was thinking this is the kind of thing that people in general sometimes they have the inner dialogue and they can be real destructive towards themselves, and that's why this poem kind of resonated with me, because I am a creative person and I have an inner critic that sometimes needs to be silenced, and I instantly recognized the inner critic of myself in this poem. Let me see what I wrote down. Yeah, sort of what I said. So I wrote down, for personal reasons, I separated the first impression and what I personally think about it. I recognized this kind of harshness in myself when I'm making videos or making music, or also when I'm running a long distance run. It's the kind of inner dialogue that I have with myself to motivate me more during running, and to kind of prove the inner voice to shut up or something. Yeah, that's what I wrote down about it. Let me just see what's might be more interesting to and more characterizing of Nietzsche. Yeah, so moving past the poems, on page 37, he also writes the following phrase, but again, I'm translating from Dutch to English, so I'm not literally reading it out. It is in English or something. So maybe I'll read it in Dutch. Maybe some of you people might find that nice, but I will translate it in English for sure. De schadelijkste mens is het allernuttigste voor het behoud van de soort. De schadelijkste mens is het allernuttigste voor het behoud van de soort. It means the most destructive person is the most useful for the preservation of humanity. And my interpretation of this is that a destructive person, he kind of stands for this renewal, disturbance of like existing structures, which he then breaks through, and that kind of like preserves humanity in Nietzsche's thinking. But I wrote that down because I was reading it, and then I started thinking like, wait a minute, this has many flaws in it as well. And I was reading more about it, and Nietzsche, he makes the clear distinction between like destructive and how do you say it in English? Degenerates, I think. So, for example, he says that people like Caesar, Julius Caesar, Kaiser, Napoleon, and artists in general, they are more useful to for the preservation of humanity because they are dangerous but creators. And for example, if you just read the phrase that I took, like the most destructive person is the most useful for the preservation of humanity, you could also think like, hey, you know, that means that a criminal, for example, is more useful or something like that. Whilst, yes, even the worst criminal might be useful for preservation of humanity because a criminal attacks a kind of morale, and a kind of, with that, the morale kind of like gets enforced, you know. It gets enforced. No, that's not the right term, but it gets, the morale gets stronger. Simple way to put it, because of humans rejecting the criminal, saying, "Hey, that's not okay." So what is okay, so what is accepted, becomes more clear, more obvious, more well preserved. You know what I mean? But he also made the distinction between like destruction and degenerates, and in that way, the criminal is as well like useful for preservation, but the clear distinction is in the creating nature. Nietzsche said that you had to like be a creator. For example, Napoleon, he's one of the biggest examples in this case, I believe, because I'm Belgian. You know, I live near Antwerp, and Napoleon, he was obviously a French emperor after the French Revolution. So, in a way, he is, to me, the like kind of like the biggest example of the Übermensch in Nietzsche's views. Why? Because he created himself to rise above like the ranks throughout the military with courage, but he also created a lot of good things. For example, like the entire port of Antwerp, it's all Napoleon's vision, and it's still one of the largest ports in Europe today. But you could go on and on and on about what Napoleon brought to Western Europe. So it's really insane. You could really like. Napoleon was one of the first who sort of like revolutionized education and said that everybody must have the rights to a certain degree of education, also identification, and all such matters. Really, really interesting stuff. Really interesting figure. But I mean, like I'm digressing, obviously, diverting. But I wrote that down because I wrote that phrase down because it intrigued me, and this whole Napoleon stuff is just purely like a little bit of spontaneous thinking, so it might be flawed, but yeah, It's what I think. If I could name one person who would most embody the Übermensch in Nietzsche's views, it's Napoleon, because Napoleon not only broke through certain habits, not himself, but the ideas that were linked on the French Revolution before him, like before Napoleon. They broke through the feudal system, monarchy, and yeah, I kind of forget the word. Anyway, but they made way for man, I'm lost in my words. They cleared the way for Napoleon's reign to be more egalitarian, like less totalitarian, even though Napoleon was a dictator by definition. But he did a lot of good stuff to Europe, and he created a lot. And that's where I think Nietzsche draws the line. You have to create stuff. Anyway, that's also why he says artists are like the most useful for preservation of the humankind, because they are able to break through certain existing morals and push it and create new things. Anyways, I also have a last quote to maybe a last thing that I wrote down. Is this one on page 38 of the book. I'll read it in Dutch first and then I'll go to English. Voorlopig is het nog steeds de tijd van de tragedie. De tijd van moraal en religie in al hun vormen. I'll translate it. Currently, it's still the time of tragedy, the time of morale and religion in all its forms. And the interpretation is, you have to look at the Greek tragedy. Life is depicted as a struggle between emergency, death, and suffering. And Nietzsche, he says that our culture, it holds on to a tragic houding, how do you say it in English? A tragic stance towards existing. So like pain, death, and suffering is the core of reality. But Nietzsche, he desires a culture that approaches life without a feeling of guilt or without a feeling of metaphysical comfort. And that's what Nietzsche tries to what he aspires, what he desires. And he says like morale and religion are ways to explain or soften the tragic life, And yeah, I also thought that was interesting, but I'm seeing that I'm already yapping on for 20 minutes. But yeah, so I'm gonna cut this one off, but I'll definitely come back with another one of these videos. Because I'm obviously gonna read the entire book, and why not just share my thoughts on it whilst whispering it into a microphone, because hey man, it's 2025 and you can do anything in life, I guess. But I'll catch you guys in the next video, so bye.